I ens anem a Europa. Anem a Europa on ens espera Katty Roberfroid. Ella és la directora general d'EGTA, és aquesta associació empresarial amb seu a Brussel·les que té associats més de 150 operadors de ràdio i televisió que produeix moltíssima intel·ligència en matèria de captació comercial i d'explotació comercial de la ràdio. Estan establerts en 34 mercats, fonamentalment europeus, però no només. L'acompanya també Ania Lara, és la directora de màrqueting també d'EGTA. I, vaja, Katty Roberfroid, we are all ears, so whenever you want.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me, and welcome to everyone. I suppose my slide will follow. So I've been asked to talk to you about why radio, and I'll explain just in a nutshell why maybe we've been invited, although I believe I was just introduced and I think all the information I was just hearing about EGTA is exactly correct. So EGTA is a Brussels-based network. We have a very strong presence in Europe, but we are also international with members outside of Europe now. And we are the network of top executives whose mandate it is to sell ads, monetize contents, and optimize revenues across devices, across platforms today. We have equally in our membership TV and video players, but also radio and audio. And for the sake of today, I will obviously only talk about radio. So, yes, okay, sonic branding, because this is very important today. But moving on, and you can still move on to the next slide. Next slide, please. Thanks. So as was said, we now cover 150 members and more, and we are now in 44 markets. We do 5 main things for our members, as you can see on the next slide. What we do is basically, next slide, please. Thanks. Monitoring everything that is happening in the market and that affects the evolution of radio and audio advertising, be it measurement, be it legislation, be it technology, software, marketing trends, consumers' behaviors, advertisers' behavior, promotion. The previous speaker said something very clever. He says digital audio is radio. We tend to say that radio is also a medium that has fully completed its digital conversion. So it is fully digital, so it's either way, but telling that message again and again is extremely important. Of course, EU affairs, lobbying, regulation is something we must follow. There's important pieces of legislation that were just adopted in Brussels yesterday, and that is all important to follow. Benchmarking, anything that members want to ask about trends that affect their business, they are welcome to ask us for European benchmark and international benchmark. And of course, EGTA is a network, so we connect people. So that's why I'm delighted to be with you all today and connect with a part of Spain that is very active in radio, as we just heard. But not radio. I think any presentation and any organization like EGTA has to contribute to rectifying some myths and some misperceptions, misconceptions sometimes. So before I start on the arguments and the reasons why anyone should consider radio and audio as an advertising medium today, just a piece of research from the US, a company called Edison Research that worked on a series of questions to agencies and advertisers and players in the industry, asking them to assess the use of radio, AM and FM of course, compared to some of the digital platforms and how much of the different medium were used when it came to share of audio and ad-supported audio amongst the 18+. To them, they made their assessment that AM/FM barely represented 30 to 35% of all the consumption, but they ranked the online platforms like Pandora and Spotify much higher. Their perception was that 80% of the listeners do listen to Pandora. Mind you, it's American figures, and then they ranked Spotify at 24%. The reality, however, is that AM/FM represents 43%, whereas Pandora is 4% and Spotify 2% only, which does mean that the audience share of AM/FM radio is 22 times larger than Spotify and 11 times larger than Pandora. Something that might be worth keeping in mind when assessing the reality. So I'd like to cover with you a few reasons why advertising on radio is definitely a thing to do. I've been asked to dig in my European experience and international membership to provide you with examples from other markets. So let me cover eight good reasons that position radio extremely well. First, clearly the reach and time spent listening to radio are as strong as ever, and the pandemic has done a lot to that, but it was the case already before. Radio and audio do offer two distinct modes of consumption. Radio is on when screens are off, it's something we like to say a lot, but radio is also on when screens are on, therefore providing a very effective background medium. Radio has an absolutely unique campaign multiplying effect on other media and therefore adds to the efficiency of campaigns. We'll get through that in a minute. The brands that advertise on radio in terms of prices do end up winning. The most cost-effective mass media is definitely radio. Radio drives traffic to the web in a very impressive way. We'll see figures. Audio creative is obviously extremely important, as always with creativity in advertising, but it is of high quality. It's not expensive in terms of production. It's fast to produce and to adapt, and it's extremely flexible, which is obviously convenient in times like today. And last, radio is definitely a trusted source of information in times of crisis, but under normal circumstances as well. It's premium content, and it definitely is listened to in an ad fraud and bots-free environment. So let me take you through those and maybe provide information from the wealth of information that we collect at EGTA. The first one I'd like to cover quickly is radio's reach and the time spent listening that are as strong as ever. This is data from an EGTA database which covers the entire membership and is updated every year. And the average shows that radio has a 70% daily reach in Europe, and it is listened to in average 3 hours and 19 minutes every single day. The pandemic has had an influence on that listening time. Of course, the only, one of the losing places to listen to radio was car, for lack of commuting, obviously. But other than that, whether it's listening online or on air, at home and outdoor and so on, radio was one of the winners in terms of listening time. So this is UK figure on the left, where they registered a 38% uplift in radio listening. The figures on the right are online listening for Germany. The blue curve is 2019 figures, the red one is the 2020, and you can see an increase in almost all day parts for that online listening consumption. As I said, radio offers very distinctive modes of consumption, and audio is on when screens are off, which offers a series of advantages. If you can, yeah. So radio and audio are clearly hands-free and eyes-free medium, so lots of freedom to use there, and therefore offer unique moments where radio alone or audio alone can reach a consumer. Reach a consumer when that their concentration level is at the highest and focus level as well. If you reach them on their mobile, that means you are in a one-to-one mobile premium environment. A piece of research has shown also that 79% of audio consumption takes place at a time where visual media could not reach the person, therefore offering a very big number of additional touch points. And of course, one of the clear truths of radio is that it is a wonderful theater of the mind, where viewers, theater of the mind exactly, can picture any pictures they want and adapt it to their reality. But as I said, it's also on when other screens are on, and radio and audio do attract attention even when they're used in the background mode. Radio amplifies the mood you're in, boosts your productivity. 35% of listeners admit to being more receptive to advertising when they feel relaxed and when they feel focused. Now, this is a very important slide, I think. Radio has a unique campaign multiplying. The three examples I'm about to mention are taken from different parts of either research or examples or EGTA as we call them. You can find, by the way, on EGTA's website a lot of the resources that I'm mentioning here in this presentation. It's egta.com. The first piece is a piece of research that was carried out in France by a TV trade body, mind you, but they wanted to do an all-media analysis of the contribution of each media to sales uplift, to campaign effectiveness, and so on and so forth. And it proved that radio, when used in combination with TV, does lead to a 38% boost in campaign efficiency. The other two examples are taken each from a case carried out by different EGTA members. One was a campaign that aimed at proving the positive impact of using radio, AM/FM, in combination with online audio. So they arrested campaigns that were only listened to on the radio, campaigns that were only listened to on online audio, and then they combined the two. And combining the two clearly led to a 40% higher ad recall. And the last one is a kind of a fun campaign. Sorry, if you can go back to the previous slide. It's just a campaign done in the Netherlands where the organizers of that campaign did completely invent a new brand that had never been heard of before. So it was really a great case to prove a point. And they combined their radio and out of home, again, radio only, out of home only, and then both. And combining those led to a 33% boost in ad recall. Brands that advertise in crisis win. This is true for all media, but brands that advertise on radio in crisis are big winners. And these are examples taken from the recent pandemic in different countries, and some of them are actually companies that use radio for the first time or use it for the first time in combination with other media. So the first example is an outdoor brand that tried radio for the first time and had an impressive 200% increase in sales year on year. The second one added used radio, to analyze its increase in online traffic. It was a campaign for a camper van, 191% increase in online traffic. And the last one is a brand that was advertising on TV and online, and that added radio to their campaign. It was a Motorola brand, and it increased its brand awareness by 11% and purchase intent by 12%. Radio is the most cost-effective mass medium. Again, this is data from our international database with averages here. On average, radio CPM is 3 times lower than TV, making it an attractive medium for fast campaigns. And including radio in the media mix can significantly improve the cost-effectiveness of a campaign, and definitely by 20%, as per this piece of research that was done in the UK by Radio Centre. Now, radio's drive traffic to the web is one of the most convincing arguments, I think, in favor of radio. This is an example from France, an M6 campaign. For the first time, and it was the only medium that was used actually by this advertiser. Allo Voisin is a platform that invites sharing contacts amongst neighbors, swapping of useless tools that you're no longer using but you're ready to lend. It's babysitting services and so on. And of course, a website like this one only works if it has traffic. So they did a radio campaign for the first time. What you see in front of the yellow line is what their online web traffic looked like prior to the campaign. What you see after is what happened the minute the radio campaign started and how the online traffic did build up as days passed by in that campaign. Amazing results. And the next slides prove about the same thing, but for different sectors. So what you have on the left is a series of sectors. This is data from the US. The sectors are tiny, but the results are the same. The peak are higher or lower, but this is automotive, it's retail, it's insurance. The last one, the big one, is jewelry, but it's all the sectors where adding radio has boosted their traffic online. And on the right, similarly, the gray area is the baseline of that brand. The green rectangles are when the campaign aired, and automatically the green triangles are the peak in online search and online web and web visits and so on and so forth. Moving on to the creative dimension of any form of advertising. This is a slide by Nielsen, which applies to all media, by the way, but these are the contribution of different elements to the success of a campaign and its contribution to sales. Creativity turns out to be one of the most important elements. And we saw before, creativity in radio is easy to adapt, the production is easy, you can very easily adapt a spot to produce different versions according to circumstances. And I'd like to mention a special case from Belgium that was later on taken up by the Netherlands, which you may have adopted also in Catalonia. But during the pandemics, as advertisers were pulling out some of their campaigns at the beginning, and the sales houses were left with inventory, they decided to offer 5 seconds free add-on tags to any advertiser that had bought campaigns on radio to allow them to slightly adapt their message, share a message of compassion, add that they were doing home delivery or that their opening hours had changed, and so on and so forth. That proved very easy to produce. It was even produced in-house in most cases, because this is one of the flexibilities that radio has to offer. And at last, radio is a trusted source of information. I think we'll all agree. I don't need to dwell a lot on that. This is a map produced by the EBU, if I'm not mistaken, and it's the trust index in the different media. Radio offers a premium content environment. It's ad fraud and bot free, and that makes it a very safe medium, something we ought to appreciate. So having covered those 8 arguments, I'd now like to move on to the second part of my presentation and drive you through a few arguments on the need to consider the many ways you can use to make the most of radio offers, whether you are on the selling side or the buying side of those radio offers. One of the very important points, and I think it was raised by the previous speaker also, is the wonderful complementarity between radio and online audio. It's a perfect match. What you see here is a deck produced by RMS in Germany, the largest private radio. The red line is the use of AM/FM radio in a normal day. The blue line is the online audio use. And you can see the complementarity throughout the day, from 5 in the morning till end of day, and the number of additional touch points that you manage to get when you use both in combination. A perfect match. Generating demand for radio, including among advertisers who think that radio or advertising on mass media is not for them, is something that some of our members have been very clever at doing. I'd like to share 2 examples, one from Turkey and one of South Africa. I told you that we are now way beyond Europe. So the first one is from Turkey, and what they did, there was not a COVID thing, it was way before COVID, by the way, but they realized that in their listenership, they had a lot of companies that were very small SMEs, and the owners were a very familiar and loyal audience of some of their channels. And they decided to use their radio programming to reach out to those people, to attract them to the possibility of using radio as an advertising medium. And they managed to turn 2,200 listeners into new advertising through interesting offers, some discount, very easy to understand media plans. So the cost of acquisition, both for Carnival, it's the name of the sales house, for new clients, but the cost of acquisition of new clients for the new advertisers, that cost was very low on both ends. They offered the complementary copywriting and production services. They proved that radio advertising is easy, is fast, and is accessible. And to them, it proved an amazing way of doing better CRM and of retaining new clients through this campaign, which they did, as I said, on their own media. Another example is from South Africa. This is a COVID example. So as many of you, I suppose, at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of advertisers pulled out their campaign, which left a lot of companies and radios with lots of inventory. They decided to run a campaign on their own radio as well and offer free advertising time to a few advertisers who could prove they were companies struggling from the COVID. They were invited to apply on a radio website, and I can't remember exactly how many free campaigns were promised, but obviously they got more than 2,500 applications for this free space, therefore showing a big greed for radio and an appetite to learn more about radio. So they did offer those campaigns, of course, but now they have an amazing database of companies that have an interest in radio, would like to invest to know more. This has been an amazing way not only to gain in PR, because the coverage in the press for this initiative was just amazing and gave them very, very positive feedback, but it was also for them a cheap way to do prospection that was in COVID but will be useful post-COVID. Now, there's many, many ways through a lot of the technological innovation that is happening now to keep radio fresh and interesting. Whether it's data-driven, whether it's voice, whether it's podcast, whether it's new technologies, there are many ways to keep both AM/FM radio interesting and fresh, but also online audio. This is, again, an example of a campaign that was done in Switzerland by a sales house called Swiss Radio World. And what they did together with Mercedes was trigger some release of campaigns based on some of the data they were connected to, whether it's Google Trends or first or third party data. And they programmed the automatic triggering of campaigns for Mercedes whenever the data from online and the Google Trends showed a dip in the number of searches for Mercedes and good traffic on competitors' websites. So whenever there was a dip on the Mercedes website's traffic, they would trigger this campaign automatically. And by doing this automatically, they observed a 14% decrease in the search for competitors and a 17% increase for searches on the Mercedes website. And other examples can be, the fact of using, for example, road traffic information to trigger the release of a campaign for massage car seats And the examples on the right is waiting for either weather climate information or pollen counts information to trigger an ad for a nose reliever, nose spray, and so on. So you can play with that data and with those trends and make radio very exciting and much more personalized as an experience. Another way also to use radio is to create entire radio and audio environment. Again, as the previous speaker said, digital audio is radio. And when you combine the strengths of both medium, you end up in environments that are truly exciting, both for the viewers or the listeners and for the advertisers. So in this case, it's again an example from Germany, a very well-known anchor from a radio show, together with the radio sales house and the radio channel. They created around her an entire environment, which is now made up of an AM/FM radio program, radio show, there's podcasts, there's online radio presence, there's a music streaming presence, and Alexa skills that are worked up by her and activated through the voice speaker. Not only does it keep the audiences very loyal and very close to you, but it also creates fabulous environments that advertisers are very interested to use, because it means they can reach both audiences, the ones that are still on AM/FM and those that are online. And we all know that it means additional touch point, as we saw, and additional audiences. Getting towards the end, I think there's lots and lots of audio innovations that are currently happening. There's more to come. You must be familiar, I guess, with a company called A Million Ads. Their value proposition is that they invite you to create a multitude of versions for an identical spot, which can then be triggered based on a number of triggers, whether it's the identity of the person, the location, city, age group, time of day, weather climate, weather circumstances. They will release a different piece of the ad or a different part of creative, meaning that you can reach out to the people in a much more personalized way. And the uplift on purchase intent when being approached with such ads that feel much closer to home was 125%. Voice, I mean, we haven't said a lot about voice, I haven't said yet, but voice-activated audio advertising is one of the big things coming up. By the way, if you look up on our website, we just released yesterday a brand new publication on voice and the many opportunities it offers, both in terms of creating loyalty, developing audiences, and of course, monetization opportunities, with lots of cases already proposed in that publication. The engagement through ads that are voice activated is also very interesting, 14.4% in some of the campaigns analyzed. And one of the last cases is the use of 3D audio, which is just a way of building up your ads and the sound for a headset-specific experience, therefore giving a feeling of being immersed in 3D reality. People tested in those conditions have shown a 2.9 high brand consideration results on their campaigns. So a recommendation is definitely to invest in the future, whether it's in the voice activated. This is just a slide on the left on the pickup of speakers and smart speakers and all voice activated technology that will come as a result. Whether it's an invitation from iHeartRadio, the largest radio company in the US, to consider podcasts and start using it, building your audiences and monetizing it. Or whether it's the premises or promises of DAB and other technologies, at least in the car environment where it is now mandatory for DAB to be installed and to be present, thus securing a presence for radio in the car. There are lots of opportunities to be valued and to be analyzed and to be considered in contact with clients, agencies, and sales houses. So concluding, just a small invitation of recommendations to step out of the radio ad spot box and consider things beyond just the radio spot. Radio is important and will remain very important, but it's radio and audio, so just look beyond. Approach each other as advertisers and agencies and radio companies as marketing experts in radio and audio. Discuss new opportunities together. There are plenty. Creativity can be at the heart of that. Consider new businesses and sectors, because there's lots of advertisers, particularly in this pandemic, people who just need that visibility and to be heard and to be seen. And dare consider and fight for budgets that are maybe much bigger than what you normally anticipate for radio budgets, because the creativity today and the merger of those two environments allow for much bigger projects yet. So with this, I'd like to conclude. I hope it has brought some interesting ideas, and I'm obviously ready for questions and answers if you have any.
Oh, that's extremely useful. Thank you for that wonderful presentation, Katty. We have some questions for you, but let me make just a reminder in català. Podeu enviar les preguntes, recordem, teniu una finestreta. Penseu que a vegades triguen un minut en arribar al nostre sistema, per tant, es podeu fer durant les presentacions. I en el cas de la Katty, que l'anglès no sigui, evidentment, un problema. Per tant, si algú té alguna qüestió que la vol formular en català, doncs jo portaré els meus millors esforços per traduir-la a l'anglès i traslladar-li. Katie, we have one question for you from Francesc Robert from Ràdio, and I'll read it to you now. It says, radio advertising in Spain and in Catalonia is over 9% of total advertising market. Which countries in Europe have a similar average? And for these markets, do you have a percentage of digital audio income, digital audio then? And have you noticed, and a third question altogether, and have you noticed an increase on radio advertising in markets that have kept audience studies? So in these markets that there have been data during the pandemic, have you noticed that due to consumption being more higher, then also the response, the answer of the advertising market has been higher as well? Thank you.
Okay, it's a lot of questions, and I think Anya should be on the line, and she's our radio expert on the line today, because I'm not the radio person. So in terms of market share, there are countries that are similar, there are countries that are much lower, and there are countries that are higher. So the champion, I guess, is the country I live in, is Belgium, where they have a radio market share that is between 14 and 15%, depending on years. So they definitely are a trendsetter and a record breaker. In some markets, and Anya, if you're online, correct me if I'm wrong, it can be as low as 4 to 5%. Countries similar to Spain would be, I feel, Germany must be around 8%. I don't know, Anya, if you're there, but if you have other figures from other markets that you want to share.
Yes, I would also say that it ranges in Europe between 5 and 15%. So countries like France would be closer to 5 to 6, then Germany 7, 8, and the markets that have very high share would be, I think, the biggest one would be Belgium and Ireland. That's connected to a strong radio market and partnerships that they do together, as well as public transport and different factors that can influence the listening and the client uptake of radio. And in terms of online audio, I think on average it's between 5 and 10% in Europe. There's different challenges with measuring how much digital audio ad spend is taken because of methodologies. What is included? Is it just the online radio? Is it also Spotify and other audio stakeholders? So I would say between 5 and 10%, and growing for digital audio in Europe.
Yeah, and the last question I think was on measurement and whether, but I'm not sure that I get exactly the point of the question. So one of the issues that happened during the pandemic obviously was the difficulty for some measurement methods to be implemented fully and to continue some of the interviews and so on and so forth. And very few markets at the moment are measured electronically. So I don't know if that was exactly the point that you were getting at, but is that what the question was about?
Well, the question was about the fact that, for example, in Spain, the EGM that measures radio ratings in Spain was suspended for a whole quarter. So we don't have any data. The radio didn't have any data to try to make for the rise in consumption. And then the point of the question was, in markets where there has been data, because electronically, as you say, or other methods, this has been a useful tool. So radio stations have been able, to achieve a better result or to achieve more growth on their advertising market.
In terms of audiences, yes. In terms of monetization, I think the difficulties have been the same everywhere. So yes, I I don't understand Catalan entirely, I understand Spanish, but so from the first presentation I understood the dips in the investments, and they were witnessed obviously in most European countries as well. The pickup started as early as May and June and then over the summer, and those were measured in those countries, of course, when they can measure the data. Yeah. So it was much easier in a market like in the Nordics, where they have that electronic audience measurement, but it was identified that the pickup started as of May or June.
I've got a question also for you. I love the way that the theater of the mind that you were talking about. Radio is cheap compared to television. We know about the strengths of radio, but also I'd like you to put some stress on what things do you think that radio has to change, and in which areas do you think that keeping all the strength that has to conquer new areas or have to modify, more like an evolution than a revolution, if I follow you well, but which aspects would you point at?
I mean, one that springs to mind both as a user and being in the position I am, and again, Anya, feel free to kick in, but it's definitely some work still can be done on the creative and turn radio into a medium that is not just a medium that drives sales or attracts attention to promotions and discounts, but use radio to build brands, obviously, but to just attract and retain the consumers in different ways. And of course, there's many ways that you can use the innovation that is coming up on the market and make it even more attractive, building much wider environments and that encompass the different platforms that can now be on, I think is definitely a way forward for radio. But Anya, you may want to offer a different point of view.
I totally agree with that creative and platforms is an important part. I would also say that maybe advances in measurement is the next step, both in radio measurement and digital audio, because advertisers are demanding more proof of ROI, proof of concept. Then I would say research from radio companies, so working together with clients and combining different data pools to prove how radio works, and especially what Katty mentioned in her presentation, how radio and digital audio is a perfect match. So I would say measurement, data, and of course innovations that Katty mentioned already.
And maybe one last aspect also, which applies to radio and is a regular complaint of the advertisers and agencies, is making radio easier to buy. Any sense of automation and quickening the automation and making it easier to buy. We all know the competition that we are up against, where buying on the online platform is just a click away. And so working on some form of harmonization of the technology and making it easier to buy is something that will also help radio a lot.
And I would just add the two markets. The two markets that are really advanced in automation and making radio easy to buy in Europe is Germany and the UK. And they, after investing in automation, after putting their resources there, now they have more uptake for clients, and they can invest more of their team's resources into sponsorship, branded integrations, and things that radio is great at, while their spot sales have been automated and are easier to attract budgets.
Yeah, time for a final question. I'll say it first in Català and then in English. Volia demanar també, la Unió Europea intenta promoure un mercat únic televisiu, de la televisió sense fronteres. M'agradaria saber, doncs, si les nostres convidades creuen que això té un sentit per la ràdio també i si pot ser una eina útil. The European Union tries to promote a single European market for television without borders, etc. And what are your feelings about it? And also, does this idea make sense for radio too?
I think I mean, from a purely commercial positioning, we need some form of harmonization. So the spirit of the European Union and creating more standardization and homogenization, providing we don't lose the identity, of course, which remains very important. But when it comes to technology, when it comes to innovation, when it comes to all these things, I think we can only gain, because the competition we're up against is truly international. All the online players and so on definitely have one approach to a market. So I think building some cohesion. We tend to say on the TV side of the organization that I lead that we need to collaborate on everything and compete on content. And I do think that this applies to radio too. I think we need to compete on the quality of the content we provide and on the identity of our stations and so on. But when it comes to the rest, I think we definitely need to work on the promotion of radio and audio. We need to work on the harmonization of standards. We need to work on the legislation. We need to work on a lot of approaches, which is the essence of EGTA, by the way. This is what we stand for and what we try to do on a daily basis. So.
Okay, then, Anya, anything from your part?
I would, on radio specifically and digital audio, I would agree with Katty that standardization, technology, and different ways of how audio can be bought internationally would be definitely useful. Radio sales are still more based on national and local particularities. But there's definitely something that we can do together on making radio easier to buy and maybe promoting radio on an international level, which we try to do at EGTA.
Perfect. Katty Roberfroid, Anya, Lara, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us.